This week's episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast is brought to you by Distilled Experiences. Distilled Experiences, Travel Kentucky. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I'm your host, Barry. This week, we have some very, very special guests. One of my favorite shows right now, the hosts of Bourbon and Blondes, Abby and Alaina. Welcome to the podcast. My goodness, I'm so excited to have you guys.
Thanks for having us.
We are super excited. You're one of your favorites. We feel so honored.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's high praise.
We'll talk about it a little bit, throughout the show too. But like, you all sent me a message right around the time that you got your show started, and I was like, "What is Bourbon and Blondes?" And then I listened to an episode, and I was just like immediately hooked.
Yes, I love hearing that.
And what was so cool about it too is that you guys, set out with this idea to cater to female bourbon drinkers or women kind of in general. But then like I started feeling like there was a message for everybody. And not only was that, so cool about what you were doing with your show, but just with this kind of general idea of the bourbon community. And so I just got excited about it and everything, and I was like, we gotta, do something together. And so naturally it was like, let's do a podcast together. So here we are.
I mean, why not, right?
We're super, super excited to be here.
After all of the tech problems, it's fun.
We can't really do Flying Blind because you guys are in St. Louis and I'm all the way in Lexington. So we'll just kind of talk about what we're drinking right now. So what are you guys sipping on?
Well, I am drinking the delicious Four Roses single barrel.
Heck yes.
Got a little sample guy, so it's the right size. I'm not going to overdo it.
We started late, so.
I wish I would have had like 3, but at this point we're good. So that's what I'm drinking, tried and true. It's delicious.
I am drinking Old Forester mint julep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I picked it up. I went to not the Derby, but the Churchill Downs when I was in Louisville a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. I don't know. I think it's about a month and a half ago. It feels like it was last week, but I've lost track of time in life.
It's hard to tell what even day it is right now.
I was like, what year is it again? But yeah, I had it as a cocktail at the races. And the woman told me, she's like, oh, yeah, Old Forester makes this. So I picked up a bottle while I was there because they do not sell it in St. Louis. And it's kind of like sweet. And I don't know, I kind of feel like it's like a dessert at the end of the night. An alcoholic dessert. The one that
bourbon dessert.
The one that puts you to sleep a little bit easier.
Right? Yeah. So when you had it at Churchill, was it actually like a crafted cocktail? Like, did they make it in front of you, or were they just kind of pouring it from the Old Forester bottle?
Yeah, so I actually asked her because I was like, oh, this is a really good mix. Like, I feel like it's a good even mix because, when you have sometimes, especially from places like that, it won't taste heavy on the alcohol. And I was like, this actually is pretty good. What do you mix in? She's like, oh, no, it's actually all Old Forester. So they made it. She told me, I haven't fact checked this, but she said they made it for the Derby, that Old Forester made it specifically for the Derby. So it's just like a pour on ice situation. So
bottled cocktail.
Yeah, it's like a bottled cocktail. So it's a mint julep.
Right.
It's all in one. So they had it all in one at Churchill.
I've had the one from Makers before, and I haven't had Old Forester yet, so I'll have to try that.
I haven't had it either, but she told me that she's tried both of them, and I don't know if she's an aficionado or not of the bourbon world, but she said she definitely liked the Old Forester 10 times better than the Makers one. So
All right,
one opinion, so we'll have to try it.
She probably drinks it a lot, though, so, you got to trust it to some level.
She gave me so much free glassware. She was either really tanked behind the... Like, I came back with, like... 80 glasses. She just kept, because you get a free glass with like every single thing you purchase. But she's like, oh, come back, honey. I'll give you more glassware. What do you want? Giving me mule cups, giving me shot glasses.
You needed like a bucket of cups to walk out of there.
She gave me one of those plastic sleeves from the plastic cups, and she just stacked them. I was like, all right, lady, thank you.
Oh, perks of being ridiculous. You get free stuff.
You lost half of them, but
Yeah, yes. They've a lot of stuff in my house has legs, so socks,
Walks away.
alcohol bottles, all sorts of things.
Well, that just might be me.
So I am drinking Jim Beam Bottled and Bond. This is from the older release style bottle. They rebranded a couple years ago, I think. And it honestly, I don't like being this way, but it's not quite been the same since. But this old style bottle of Jim Beam Bonded has been really, really good, and something that we've talked about a lot on the podcast. And actually, I have a little honey hole in Lexington where I know I can get a few more of these. So
There you go. You got to have your spots that you go to.
I've got like, where I'm going for my deals, and I've got where I'm going for the people that are holding bottles for me and everything. So yeah.
I feel like we need to be friends with you like in Lexington and on some level, because our sources here are limited because it's not Kentucky.
Yeah, we actually had a friend of mine that told me about a place across the river in Illinois that they sell them for kind of a higher markup, but I guess one of the owners of like a small shop, he just gets a bunch of rare stuff in, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, and he's like, you got to go in there sometime. So that's on our
side.
Yeah, it's on the east side. Yeah, so it's on our list to go over and try and peep the scene.
So I want to. This kind of reminded me of something too that it's been a weird coincidence recently. So I work with a tour company called Distilled Experiences, and over the past 3 weeks, past 3 weekends rather, I have had multiple groups of folks from Missouri.
Oh,
Really?
It's like each weekend, it's been a
weird.
new group from Missouri. It's so weird.
Well, no one's as cool as us, but Missourians
Yeah,
aren't bad.
amen to that. I mean, you guys need to come and like hang out with me and do a tour and everything.
One day.
but-
One day.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that I've been able to talk about recently, and it's been a sore spot, of course, but how poorly our Cardinals did during the
Oh,
the
no.
World
You
Series.
had to bring that up,
I
huh?
know. I mean, can we coax it over by talking about how well the Blues did, though?
That's been everybody's response is that the Cardinals sucked, but the Blues they were okay this year.
Which is
I'm
funny
like,
because Alaina doesn't even really like follow sports at all, but the fact that she just made that joke, that's exactly how sports in St. Louis are going.
I have high level knowledge that I can crack a joke once in a while. That's my sports knowledge, and my politics knowledge. Although we probably won't get into that, but
No, don't.
like one article a week. If you talk about anything outside of that, I'm like, I have no clue.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
God.
Fair enough. Anyway, yeah, so it's just been really fun for me recently to see kind of specifically the St. Louis or the Missouri aspect of interest in bourbon, and you guys kind of you definitely fold into that as well. And so we'll talk about that later on with the episode too. But, and I think we kind of might have touched on this a little bit, but I got to ask you guys because it's crucial to the episode. What have you been drinking recently?
Oh God. Well, I
good
was
answer.
I was just
Should
in
we start?
Ireland for 8 days for my
Whoa.
birthday. Yeah, I'm like 2 weeks back, still kind of fighting the jet lag situation. I sound a little sick right now, so it's like a cute thing. So I've actually been kind of like on an Irish whiskey kick, and it's not really bourbon. They age it in bourbon barrels,
okay.
which kind of gives it that sweeter flavor. But I don't know, like Jameson has their Middleton line that I've been drinking a lot of. My tried and true is anything out of Old Forester. 1920 is like my go-to. Like if I'm at a
heck
bar,
yes.
that's what I'm drinking.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of like a weird answer, but
We just did an episode on I have it right here actually. My bar is close by since we moved downstairs. It's,
For everybody who doesn't know, we had some technical difficulties beforehand, but
some
we're
is
all
like
good
the
now.
understatement of the year.
So we did an episode last week on this Broken Barrel, and I mean I drink a lot in all types, but this was like a very pleasant surprise this week, especially.
Yeah, it's out of California. We were not expecting this at all.
Yes, we got 3 samples of it, and it's, how do you pronounce it? The Mizunara. It's like supposed to be a Japanese style. It's a 4-year Indiana corn and 5-year
So it's like
Kentucky
more
corn.
whiskey based. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good. It was smooth as hell. It was very, very good.
I don't know anything about that product. I mean, honestly, like aside from your episode, this is the first I've ever heard of it.
Well, when they reached out to us, we are like, oh, because that's like basically infused spirits is where they branched off from. So they put the fruit in the bottle of vodka. So like when you buy the bottle of it, it's still in there. And then they started dabbling in whiskey. So they buy like aged whiskey. So it's aged in barrels. Some of it's bourbon. And then what they do is they age it for like a couple more months to a year with staves from broken, like they break barrels and they put the staves inside of the whiskey and they age it for like 6 months in a steel tank. So it's like got a different taste. And I mean, the Amontillado one is it's like basically like a wine cask, but instead of finishing it in a wine cask, they put the staves, they like break out like the barrel and they put the staves inside and they age it with the staves inside.
Yeah, me and her favorite was this Isle of Peat. So it's kind of their take on a really smoky whiskey, like a scotch.
But
yeah.
I mean, that's what we've been drinking. Just like the weird stuff that people like come out of the woodwork and like, hey, have you tried this? And we're like, no. And they're like, oh, we'll send you samples. I'm like, okay.
That one was, I mean, probably what I drank over the weekend. And I also really like this cocktail I think it's called Part-Time Lover. And it's...
Welcome to Bourbon and Blondes.
Yeah, right?
But it's bourbon.
It's going to be a very like E-rated episode. Of,
that's probably why our podcast is E-rated all the time between my cursing and weird oddball comments. But it's I put Woodford in it, or what else? Yeah, that's I think what I put in it over the weekend was Woodford. A little bit of like the tequila. I think they say sweet, or what is it? It's like the tequila mix. So
like what you put in margarita?
Yeah, and then I think it's Saint Germain and some bitters.
what the heck is this cocktail?
It is so good.
Part-Time Lover.
I'm gonna send you the
it's
link.
weird, right?
I'm gonna send you the link,
right.
but I Googled it because Tyler's the one who told me about it, and
Oh my God, that's
I was like,
hilarious.
or he made it, and I was like, damn, this is good. So yeah, here we are. That was the other one I had this weekend.
So basically, literally what we drink is constantly changing.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why this segment is so much fun because, we get to talk about what's, maybe we're not drinking bourbon all the time or, the different ways that we're drinking bourbon and everything. And what's funny is that, like, during this time of year, and I don't talk about it a whole lot on the podcast, but I get really excited about Oktoberfest beers.
Do you?
So yeah, no,
Okay.
and it wasn't until a couple of years ago that Yingling was finally released in Kentucky,
Yeah.
and their Oktoberfest is one of my favorites.
I've never had it.
Oh, it's so good.
I love
Oh my
Yingling.
gosh.
Like, I love it, but you can't get it here.
Yeah, because
Yingling, period.
Yeah, it's not west of the Mississippi. Like,
'Cause of
if I drove
AB.
into Illinois, maybe, but that's like a 30-minute commitment and I'm not in. So
Right.
it's like you can't get it here.
Yeah, who sells that? Who sells
Literally no one west of the
No,
Mississippi.
I was gonna say. I think it was a issue with selling it over here because it wasn't an AB product. Because Anheuser Busch is located over
okay.
here in St. Louis.
Yeah, they ruin everything.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Well, we
right.
actually have a ton of microbreweries, and so
Schlafly's Oktoberfest is so good.
yeah. I was
Oh my
gonna
gosh,
say-
yes, it is.
You've
Yeah.
had it?
Yes, I have. No, they sell it in Kentucky.
Okay.
It's a hometown beer.
Yeah, no, and so when I was kind of starting to like beer and everything, I had the Schlafly Pale Ale.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, not the IPA, but it's I think it's just called their pale ale.
Yeah, yeah.
They might have rebranded it since then, but that was one of the best beers I've ever had at that time, and I don't think I've actually had it since then. but
Really?
Goodness gracious, it was so good.
They have a stout that's aged in whiskey barrels.
Their coffee stout is it their coffee stout? Because their coffee
yeah.
stout is freaking delicious. Probably one of my favorite coffee stouts.
I didn't know that they had a whiskey aged.
Yeah.
beer.
Almost every microbrewery or like smaller brewery, not AB, has a stout or some type of beer that's aged in a whiskey barrel or bourbon barrel. It's crazy. It's so good.
We have so many microbreweries here. It's like I mean, there's
beer
one
town.
popping up every other year. I mean, if I was to guess, at least 20 here.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, it feels like it's kind of the same way in Lexington, but I mean, maybe not to that extent anymore. But they've certainly like really, really caught on in probably the past 5 to 10 years.
It's kind of
But-
fun.
Hey, I just wanted to stop in real quick and talk to you about our sponsor for the week. That is Distilled Experiences. It is a company that I work with. They're right out of Lexington, Kentucky. It is owned and operated by the man himself, Nate Taylor, who has actually been on this show before and has a huge passion not just for the bourbon industry, but for Kentucky in and of itself. The company itself takes you around from different distilleries and shows you what it is that makes Kentucky bourbon so special and so fantastic. If you would like to hop on one of those tours, there are 2 available for the public throughout the week on Friday and Saturday. For a 10% discount, you can use the code MyBourbonPodcast at distilledexperiences.com. And that is something that is exclusive, of course, to you, the listeners of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. And you might just have the opportunity to have good old Pear Bear as your tour guide. So you might just want to, go and do that. This offer is exclusively available through distilledexperiences.com. So if you are interested in that, please head over there to do that. They do have really, really cool things that are happening after the first of the year. One of the biggest things, of course, is going to be international trips headed over to Ireland and Scotland. So that's going to be a really, really fun experience. If you want to find out more about that, please, please, please let us know. We would be happy to direct you to find out how you can get more information about those trips. Once again, thank you so much to Distilled Experiences for being our sponsor of the show. We're going to drop right back into the episode, so enjoy the rest of the show. So I guess that's what we've been drinking recently. I figured that we would do something kind of in the style of Bourbon and Blondes, and I wanted to give you all a word.
Oh, no.
Like you all do.
I love it.
Okay. And it was something that I talked about a little bit on our 100th episode,
Okay.
but I figured that it was kind of fun to have this conversation on 2 kind of opposite ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing this for 2 years now. You guys have been doing this for
2 months?
Well,
3 months?
you've been doing it for like 6 or
months.
7, right?
Or no, well, 5,
No,
I
our
guess.
podcast
5 will
went
be in
live
November.
on July 11th.
Gosh, has that been it?
October,
Yeah.
November. So not
We
even
released our first 4
4
episodes
months.
on July 11th.
So that's why it feels like you've been doing it for longer than you have, because you dumped everything on the
Yeah, we cheated a
on
little at the
first
beginning.
day.
With all of our technical issues, it does feel like 6 months. It probably has been 6 months.
Okay, so 2 years to 4 months.
Right. It's
Um,
fine.
I figured it was kind of important to talk about perseverance.
Ooh. It's a good
Yeah.
Okay.
word.
And
Like it.
I have had the really good fortune to enjoy working with something that I have loved so much over the past couple of years, and for 101 episodes, and now with this 102. But what does perseverance mean to you guys? See, I'm totally taking a page out of your all's playbook with this.
No, that's good. We like this.
I
Yeah.
like it.
Puts us on the spot, which we're not used to. We're usually actually prepared.
Kind of.
Well, I'm not. Alaina is.
Fair enough.
I am very like obsessed about like researching the word, finding articles that like go with the word, like kind of thought. Then I listen to podcasts about the word to like kind of come up with clips of different ideas, and then yeah. But no, I guess perseverance for me, the first thought is to continue onward despite challenges, diversity, issues.
The true definition of the word.
Yeah.
Webster
Like a
himself said it.
Like I read the
Webster
dictionary as a kid.
He was a dude. He was a real person.
Oh man.
But I guess for me, I think of, I mean, all the different things that we struggle with. I mean, just think of before we even started, like an audience. Like I remember doing our first podcast and we're like talking to people on
But
the
we
podcast.
don't think there's nobody there.
There's nobody, like we don't even
Yeah,
have an
right.
audience. We haven't published anything yet. Like we don't even know if one person's gonna listen.
So it's like, if you're listening, it feels like like the Aliens movie or whatever. If you're out there, tell us. But like you keep recording, right? Like you keep moving on. You keep recording. You keep telling
Yeah.
your story and talking about it, and you eventually find people who listen, like you. And now we're here.
And I do listen.
And it's like you never. I think we've talked about this in episodes before, but it's like you never find your people. You never find common ground. You never find like friendships if you don't like put yourself out there and be vulnerable and like go against the grain and go. You know, you can be entitled, weird, or too opinionated, or you know, too much this or too much that. You know, which
Yeah.
we both have. And it's like, you know, you don't never know who your people are. And not everyone's going to be your people. And it's to continue to persevere. And despite like people shit talking or somebody saying, well, that's not good. Or taking it as advice, you know, depending on the person.
Yeah, right?
Because there's always
Always that
one,
opinion.
There's always that one person that's like, I don't know if we should trust your opinion. But yeah.
Oh, perseverance. God, I kind of hate this word a little.
Why?
Because it feels like every time I turn around, like every week, it's another obstacle. It's like, oh, well, at work this happened. Or, oh, guess what? You popped your tire. Now you have to deal with a flat tire. It's like constantly something. It's like in the face of adversity. And, you know, it's every time it happens, every time you have to persevere through something that just sucks. It's always not fun. Like it's the worst.
Yeah.
Every time you do that, you prove to yourself how much stronger you are as a person. And to me, that's the biggest lesson I get out of it. Like perseverance is perseverance. Like you really have no choice. Like you got to buckle up and get through it. But then on the other side, once you've persevered and you've conquered it, you're like, wow, I'm awesome. Like I just did that. I did it without help. I did it with help. I made this move in my career. Like there's so many things. And it's just like taking that minute on the other side of it to like sit there and say, oh, wow, great.
Some reflection.
Feel stronger. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really kind of good way to talk about perseverance, is that it is active reflection with positive motivation.
Yeah. Okay.
I like it.
It's a shorter
So-
version of what I just said.
So you're always, you know, you're aware of where you've been with the intention of moving forward.
Right.
Right.
It's so
and I
important.
think that, you know, in that same kind of vein, as you are, you know, facing life's trials and tribulations, for lack of a better phrase,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you are able to stand up and say, I am stronger than this, I'm better than this, and fight for something that you really truly believe in, or something that, you know, you think can be good or important in the future. And, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot for perseverance. All it takes is just that little spark of inspiration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
So,
true.
you know, whether it starts as three guys sitting in a room talking about bourbon and basically just drinking all the time, or, you know, two women sitting together trying to encourage other people.
Yeah.
And knowing that there is something that needs to be heard or needs to be said, you know, there is so much power behind perseverance.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, there really is.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, it's really fun to kind of see, really, you know, on the opposite ends of the spectrum. You guys have been doing this since the first half of this year of 2019.
Yeah.
We've now passed 2 years with our show, and I see that energy and that excitement and that perseverance with you guys. And I mean, when I ask people on the show, it's not because I'm like, you know, struggling for someone to be on. It's because I feel connected to what they're doing.
That's great.
And and it maybe this is going to turn into an hour of me just gushing about, you know, how much I love what you guys are doing with
Look,
Bourbon and
I'm
Blondes,
not bad
but-
at it. You can keep the compliments coming, okay?
I know. I'm usually not on the receiving end of compliments.
Yeah.
So I'm really thoroughly enjoying it.
enjoying
Thank
it.
you so much.
So and this was something that I really kind of struggled with initially, but how did you guys overcome that feeling of, are we just screaming into the void? Is anybody listening?
Well, we're still kind of
I
asking
still
that
feel
question.
that way.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I don't know about you, but I think it's like people like you and people. So Abby is our social media guru. So anytime that a lot of folks are interacting, it's usually, it's not usually, it is with Abby.
It's always me.
I'm aware.
But I think the connections that we've made with people is probably one of the biggest parts of it that makes us feel like we have purpose.
Yeah.
I did have one girl at work say that she had listened to it, that her boyfriend is a huge bourbon enthusiast. He lives in St. Louis. They both live in St. Louis. And she's like, I just listen to like learn a little bit more. And
Didn't she say that we talked about one of the restaurants here at the Midwestern, and she like heard us talking about the drinks and the food, and so she like suggested it for a date night, and she's like, it was a huge win. Like we went and he was so impressed.
That's
and It was
awesome.
like,
Yeah.
it's like little anecdotes like that. Even like my sister who lives in Nashville, she'll call me after she listens to an episode on her way to work, and she goes, oh my God, I loved when you said this. This was great. She's like, I have to tell my friends. And then like her friends started reaching out, and we're like, oh my God, this is so great. And it's just, even my work people, like at my corporate office, are like, I can't believe you're doing this. That's so cool. So it's, even if like you don't listen and you just tell me it's a great idea, I'm like, great, cool, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it's too, I think it's the knowing that if you could just like impact, if it's not just the bourbon, the influence of the bourbon, if it's also, that's why we like adding the word in to give some perspective on what
Add to bourbon.
Yeah,
Like life.
Yeah, about life and how we do things, and if that helps one person, like it feels really good to make an impact if that's how we can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the bourbon is the conduit towards that, right? And you know, we talk so much on this show about how the community is centered around this one aspect, or this one, in essence, kind of small detail that does bring us all together. And it's a shared experience, and it's something that we can have common interest in or common thoughts about. And the fact that we are putting ourselves out there as podcasters, as creative folk, creative-minded people,
Yeah.
you know, I think that we allow that that conversation or that community to grow a little bit.
Absolutely.
Right? But
Yeah.
so you guys are a little bit more conversation focused,
Correct.
right? Than we are in our podcast. But how has the bourbon aspect of your show kind of contributed to your growth or to the way that you've shaped your show too?
I mean, honestly, like right out of the gate, the bourbon community was probably our biggest supporters. Like, bourbon is something that we bonded over. It's something we drink. In my opinion, when you pour yourself a glass of bourbon or you mix a cocktail, you're going to sit there and enjoy it. It's like a means to slow down. Everything around us is so fast. It has to be done quick. It has to be efficient and everything. But it's like, no, I want to sit down and I want to have this conversation, and focusing on the bourbon and learning about it and talking about it and going through the tasting on the show and all of that. It's kind of forced us to, like, it almost sets the tone for the show. It's like, wow, we learned this, we discovered this. What did we learn about ourselves in the process? What do we want to talk about? How do we want to invite people in? And I mean, bourbon or no bourbon, it puts you in a position to like sit there and be patient and talk. And it's such a rare thing these days.
Yeah, and I think that's how, when we framed out how we wanted the podcast to look like, we wanted it to be like we were hanging out, like me and her having a drink, having a conversation, having a deep conversation, just like we would if we, were at a bar. Yeah.
Like how it all started at Brennan's. We're just sitting there drinking, no phones, no nothing. We just like were talking. And
Abby's drunk idea. She's like, we should just start a podcast called Bourbon and Blondes. I was like, that's a good name.
That sounds like have you guys ever watched How I Met Your Mother?
Kind of not really. My TVs are unplugged right now.
I've watched a few.
Well,
I've watched a
on
few
Hulu
episodes.
and everything, but at one point, two of the characters are like, "We should start a bar," and that drunken idea of
wow,
there's something behind this. But
I'm so glad we didn't say bar. That's a lot more expensive.
Yes, that is very true.
It's too much.
Anyway, yeah, but I do love that it was that initial kind of bonding that led to something more creative and led to something that, you guys were able to throw out into the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's
and
also kind of selfish. Like, we want to talk about our stories because, I mean, we've all been through things and we're like, wow, we just have to talk about this. It's almost like therapeutic, right? So we're just talking about our lives and it's over bourbon. And it's just like, this is great. It's selfish almost to an extent, right?
And it's like a fun, what you were saying about creative outlet in the sense of like writing the outline, for example. I think I've talked about that before, where I start to like dig in and research and we both start talking about like words, what words are appropriate for the whiskey. What do they
mean to us?
Yeah, and what does it mean to us? And I don't know, just kind of expands mind and thought. So it's kind of a growth opportunity too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and in this case, we can tie perseverance back into bourbon.
Yeah, big time.
Bourbon takes time.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's unless you're genetically modifying how the whiskey is produced, bourbon is not an overnight deal. I mean, it does take seasons, it takes years, it takes patience and
failure.
I think that perseverance is kind of part of that. It's, allowing yourself the time and the opportunity to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I mean, I've said this before, I'm a very trial and error kind of learner.
Right.
Right? So episode 1 is totally different from how episode 100 was.
Oh, well, of course.
And
you learn and you grow.
It's in no small part to the fact that my brain goes, well, that worked a little bit, but the majority of it didn't work. So let's kind of regroup and figure this out and, see what we can do to make this better. And, without allowing myself the headspace to think, I want to continue doing this. I want to persevere through this, push through this, and make it as good as it can be. It would have just fallen on its face. And I feel like, perseverance is not a negative adjective.
No.
Adjective?
Yeah.
No. It's a
Um,
verb.
Verb?
Yeah, I think it's a
Well,
verb.
persevere is a verb, right?
So yeah, perseverance is an adjective then.
Go
It's
with your
one of the
go
two.
with your go with your gut. I am not
Yeah, all
someone
right,
to ask
sure.
about the
I was an
English
English
language.
major for a few years.
Look, if
so-
you need help with math or numbers, I'm your girl.
Yeah, yeah, okay, great, because I do not have that. I got an art degree, and yeah.
Same media communications.
Okay, well, I'm not like either of you.
I will say to plug it back in to plug your business real quick. What occurred to me when you were talking about persevering, you were talking about bourbon, and you were talking about businesses. Why I think it's incredibly important, and I've taken a lot of bourbon tours in Louisville, and I've taken some whiskey tours here in St. Louis as well. A lot of like company owned, very small companies. Some of them larger, if you go to some of the larger like Jim Beam, Woodford and all those. But I think taking a tour is so important and it touches on persevere because you understand the family's passion or the individual's passion. So a lot of times it's families. Passion behind the product. Like you'll walk through and you'll be looking at the barrels and they'll be telling you like the different picks and how they taste. And there's just there's such a passion in, like you said, it's not something that happens overnight. So it's something that you have to commit to multiple years of doing and continue on tasting. It's multiple people who usually are involved in that, but like doing the tastings and continuing to make choices and trust their gut of
absolutely.
how that tastes and how they need to alter it, how they need to change it, or keeping it as is. And it's usually not like, 200 different tasters that go. It's just a handful of people that are making these decisions. So that's why I think tours, it's sometimes with some tours, it's like you've seen one, you've seen them all. But I was on, I guess I've probably seen about 7 Louisville tours. And
So you have a habit.
And I'm just like, some of them are better than others, but there's definitely ones where you can see such a passion for what they do.
Yeah, and do you get to hear like how they've overcome like the obstacles in the family and like the setbacks and things like that. But like I was saying, you can, when you do a tour, and I experienced as a Jameson, like I got to hear about how they were able to keep the master distillers and the coopers on site in their global headquarters distillery in familial lines. Like they were like, yeah, it was a challenge, but we were able to keep these jobs as like generations in a family, which I mean, for a company that's on that scale as Jameson is, that was my favorite part. It's like, okay, you guys figured it out in a way to overcome certain obstacles and having to hire certain people and all of that, but you kept it in the family basically, which is kind of impressive in and of itself.
Yeah, and the fact that there is this kind of common shared interest within families too. I mean, that's perseverance at its finest.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, we cannot not talk about the Jim Beam family when we talk about perseverance. So there was one member of the family. Here we go. So Jeremiah Beam, who was the master distiller in the early 1900s at the Jim Beam Company. Would drive home every day with a jar of yeast.
Really?
Yes. So that was just in case the distillery burned down.
You're kidding.
So no. Every single day he would take a strain of yeast in a jar, drive home with it, and drive it back to work too.
Well, if I was
the
his
distillery
wife,
still
I'd be like,
existed.
you're crazy. Like, what is this?
Yeah, right? But the fact that, he had that vision, and I think that's another big thing about perseverance is that you have a vision for your project or for your future. And I think it's kind of something that, and I'm not trying to get like too, hoity-toity or anything, but I think that's something that, is kind of lost in this day and age is that, there is no perseverance. There is no, desire to push through obstacles and everything. And, it really is not always easy.
What do you call the stamp? Because I was going to bring this up. What do you call the number that they give to a distillery? Like
The
Is it-
DSP?
is that it? The SP? Like it's the number, and there's like 12,000. Because I was gonna bring up that there was two distilleries that I know of. So Nelson's Greer, I think, in Nashville, and then
Greenbrier.
yeah, Greenbrier, and then Peerless. Both had family members that tried to get their number back from when they were, I don't know, producing in the 1800s or the early 1900s. And yeah, that's a perfect example of perseverance. Anyway, I was
Did
trying
they
to figure.
get the numbers back?
Yeah,
though?
they both
Oh,
got the
okay.
numbers back.
They did.
Yeah,
You're
It
like
was-
nodding, like I have no idea.
because it was one was like in the double digits, another one was in the triple, like
Oh, so
hundreds.
they were early.
Yeah, because now there's like
Mm.
12,000 or something crazy.
It's ridiculous however many there are. Yeah.
It's all those
Or
stupid
24,000.
craft distilleries ruining the game.
How dare they?
Rude.
Anyway, so it's not a super long conversation to be had about it, but in just kind of in the style of Bourbon and Blondes, perseverance I think is crucial to anything that you feel passionate about,
100%.
Right.
right? Yeah, and there are no small stones.
No, they're
To be
like
turned.
boulders.
What was that?
Pianos falling from the sky.
I said they're
It's like a cartoon.
okay. I was still trying to stick with the rock theme. I said they're like boulders. So not
Okay,
pianos
all
falling
right.
from the
Fair
sky,
enough.
but
Yeah,
close enough.
I got you now. Anyway. So I really, really want to encourage people to go and listen to Bourbon and Blondes, because not only is it a fun, look at, a way to have a conversation around just hanging out and drinking bourbon and then talking about things that are important to you, but also it's motivational.
Thank you.
Really and truly, it is motivational, and you're welcome. Yeah, and I mean, I again, it's something that I talk about all the time, but I do, struggle with anxiety and depression. It's just
I mean,
something
honestly,
that is,
everybody does.
yeah, and it's just part of my
Same.
story, and I talk about it because it should be normalized. And
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely.
yeah, and having something that is, out there in the public, especially in this culture, in this community, that is built around encouragement,
Mm-hmm.
is important, And I'll go ahead and plug a little bit. I will have talked about it already, but we do have our Movember campaign coming up here in a couple of days, where we're raising money for Movember and for men's health and men's mental health and everything. So
We love this.
Yeah,
We're doing an
We're
event
actually
for it.
doing it as well.
Are you really?
Yeah, that's exactly what came to mind when you said that was Movember, because it's for, I think it's prostate health and then mental health, so men's
Suicide
awareness.
Holy
which,
freaking crap! That is amazing.
Yeah, November 16th in St.
Yeah.
Louis, we're doing a big beard contest event with a venue here.
Ballpark Village. So if anyone listening or you will be around on
Yeah,
Saturday,
come on.
November 16th, Ballpark Village downtown.
I might just come on up to St. Louis.
It's
for
what,
that.
like a 4-hour drive? You got this. Come on.
Not to sound weird, but there's
we'll talk about that a little bit. But
There-
I think that I might have to come up
Wait.
and-
Tell us more about what you're doing for your fundraiser. Like,
Yeah.
how are you guys structuring it?
So it's really all it's all online based,
Mm-hmm.
right? But folks are gonna get. I guess we'll do the whole advertisement for it now.
Yeah, why not? Bring it on.
So if you donate even just as much as like $1, you have the opportunity to ask a question where we will do like an exclusive Q&A for people
Awesome.
who donate. We're going to have some prizes as well, which include like So people will get things like, a sample flight that I've handpicked for them as well. Working on maybe a fundraising event where we have a private screening of the movie Neat. I don't know if you guys have
Yes. Oh my
watched
God, I
that.
saw that. It's great.
Yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. And Freddie Johnson, who is a tour guide at Buffalo Trace, is a huge, huge part of that. I'm trying to figure out a way to include him in that
That's awesome.
as well. But it's really, solely internet-based or network-based.
I love that. That's so great.
So, I figured, with the podcast, it's all online.
Yeah,
We
send
will
us a
hide
link.
mine.
May as well
Yeah.
make that- yeah, exactly.
Send us
That's
over
our
the
main
link.
platform. So
We'll post it.
anyway, yeah.
That's so great. I love it.
Yeah. So, anyway, Bourbon and Blondes is, a great source of encouragement and inspiration. And I think that you guys are doing a great job with your show. And
you.
please, please, please persevere and continue doing this show.
Oh, we
Please.
will. We will.
Because I really
yes.
do look forward to it every week. And I enjoy it so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to try not to gush too much, as I said.
No, it's okay. You can.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very well done. I think that does it for this conversation for the episode, but we're not quite done yet. We do still have our infamous segment, Tips and Bits, where we recommend something. So it doesn't necessarily have to be bourbon. I mean, if you've been watching something or reading or listening to something or, anything you want somebody to, go and check out, you guys can recommend that. So what would your all's tips and bits be for this week?
Tips and bits for this week. Ooh. That's a great question.
I will start.
Oh, Elena's got it up here ready. She pulled it up on her phone.
I had to Google it really quick.
The usually non-prepared one.
I am reading a book right now that is definitely not bourbon related, but it is inspirational. It's very hippy dippy. So
A little crunchy, huh?
it's a little crunch, it's a little granola, but it's by Sean Korn. It's a female. Sean spelled with an E, last letter an E, not an E in the middle. Anyway, it's called Sean. It's
But not in that order.
yeah, never mind. It's called Revolution of the Soul. I hate reading books, unlike Abby, who loves reading books.
Thank you. I'm a nerd. We know.
Yeah, but I don't have the patience to read them. But this one talks about she talks about her struggles and her trials and tribulations of life and struggling with just like her ego and her life issues and her trauma in the past. So I think it's pretty relevant to just about anyone. And I don't think you have to do yoga, but I think you just have to be like self-aware, and sometimes you have to dig in deep and you have to take a moment. And even having just conversations with people help you better understand yourself. And someone said to me this week, they're like, if you don't understand yourself, then nobody else can get to know you. And
wow.
yeah,
Oh.
Okay.
Dang.
A little deep for
for like 10 p.m. at night, but
Shoot,
a
man.
it's a little bit of whiskey thoughts for
Where's
you.
the rest
All right.
of my roses?
This is my bourbon podcast. Good night.
But I am like addicted to reading it right now about like talking about trauma and healing and mental health and just like working through your shit and like not being okay. What you said, like not like especially in I think women talk about it more because mental health is an easier topic with women, and it's
We're
like
just naturally more open about it.
well, and
Yeah.
there's just a lot of shame associated and with men with talking about mental health and not being okay and just talking about emotions in general. So I think this is probably I guess this is my little hot thing for this past
Elena's
few weeks.
hot take.
Yep.
Her tips and
And my
Hot
tidbits.
takes.
Wait, what are we calling it? Tidbits, tips and
Tips
what?
and bits is the name of the
Tips and
segment.
bits. I don't want to get those
Tips. I'll
letters
just take
mixed
the
up.
tips, okay?
No, people have done that before, so we're gonna. I feel like that's super inappropriate with a show that's Bourbon and Blondes.
It's fine. Cut it out. It's fine.
All right, Abby, please tell us what's your tips and bits for this.
That's so funny because I thought you meant money tips until right now. Wow. Oh boy. All right.
Okay, so I'm gonna start talking. Stop. Okay, so my tip for the week, it's a little bit of a humble brag. So I'm vice chair of a Young Friends board here for Jazz St. Louis. It is a music venue, but it's also a nonprofit, and what we do is we raise money for music education in the city. So all of the money we raise through our shows and through our fundraisers goes back to free music education for all the kids in the city. So schools, kids who come and want to learn music. For me, this is a big deal because I was given the opportunity to learn an instrument and I didn't take it. But when you look at testing on a kid, it's so important that they diversify what they learn. And when a kid learns music, their behavior in the classroom, their analytical skills, their math and science skills, they double. It's like off the charts how they do on their testing, and that will help them in their education and persevere. And then at the end of every season, so our season starts in the fall, ends in the spring, we give out about 3 or 4 full ride scholarships for our high school students who have come and trained with the world-renowned jazz, the artists who come and play with us. And
that is amazing.
You know, it's just a really cool organization and education for kids who don't have access to equal education. That's like my jam. So I love what they do and I love being a part of it. And that's check them out. If you're ever in St. Louis, come to Jazz St. Louis show. Hit me up, Bourbon and Blondes. I'll take you, buy you a drink, and we'll have a good time.
There you go. All right. So I cannot not endorse that too, being a musician myself. I mean, like, it just it just it resonates so much with me that, you know, the arts are supported in public schools, and
it just keeps getting cut.
It really does, and it's so frustrating, and it's not a conversation to be had right this second, but
another day.
Arts should be supported in public schools, I think. And, you know, without, you know, that encouragement and that support in high school, I wouldn't have felt like I was creative enough to do something like this.
That's so huge.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that, you know, everybody has to. An arts degree does not necessarily mean that you're a painter that's struggling to live off the fat of the land, or
not
or
even a
anything.
little. No.
But it can mean that, you know, you are creative minded, and I think that's something that should be nurtured. So I guess my tips and bits this week are support creative minds.
I like it.
Check out Creative Mornings. I don't know if it's in the area, but our girlfriend Samantha Smagala here in St. Louis helps head. It's all over the country.
It's all over the world.
Yeah, and So Far Sounds. I would say so. Creative Mornings.
Yeah, you should bring So Far Sounds to Lexington.
Yeah, if it's not, you'd be surprised. It may already be. It's like all over. It was in Columbia. I was like,
we just basically geek out anytime somebody starts talking about creative stuff, which is wild because I'm a numbers person. Like, I'm anti-creativity, like, in my career.
But I think that's the beauty of Creative Mornings is they talk about, like, you don't have to be a graphic designer, you don't have to be a musician, you don't have to be this to be creative. Like, I think at a certain part of your life, we were told, like, creativity was like a negative thing, like having an imagination, have an imaginary friend was like a negative thing. And so it's like, well, maybe you should have an imaginary friend as an adult. I mean, hey, do you? But that literally came out of my mouth, and I was like thinking of skit anyway.
Like, that's not a good example. Creative Mornings is great.
Yeah, Creative Mornings is awesome. And So Far Sounds is
creativity.
Amazing.
Like, because in creativity you get to be your whole self, right? Like, that is
Absolutely.
your expression of who you are, and it's
that is
don't
such
be
a
afraid of
great
it.
way of putting that.
Yeah,
you get to show people who you are.
Just
when you are
authentically who you are. Every piece of you is right there up front, and it is so underrated and it is so underappreciated. So, you know, go get your imaginary friend.
Persevere. Persevere and be creative. with your imaginary friend.
I couldn't help myself.
I just want to note that as a child, I tried to have an imaginary friend so hard, and I could not create one, and I was pissed.
That is so sad. That is the saddest thing I've heard in a long time.
Like, how do you try and have an
your imaginary friend could have been
real?
anything. It
I
could have
would,
been a
like,
rock.
search
It could have
my
been a
parents'
dragon. It could have been a stick that you found walking down the street, and you were like,
They
I just
literally
can't
don't
think of
exist.
anything.
I would search my parents' closets, and I'm like, I still can't find it.
Oh, that is amazing.
That's
Okay,
a great way
anyway.
to end this episode, you know?
You're welcome.
I couldn't find my imaginary friend. Well, they don't exist, so.
All right. Anyway, Abby and Alaina, thank you all so much for being on this week's episode. Where can people find you on social media, and where can people find your podcast?
Our podcast is available on all podcast platforms, supposedly. I don't know. Apple and Spotify are the big ones. And then Instagram is probably our best social media because I prefer it. And it's at Bourbon and Blondes. So it's spelled out Bourbon and A-N-D, Blondes. So stalk us, love us, and listen.
It's not often that people encourage stalking.
We don't have any
We've
stalkers.
branded our podcast after what we look like. I think we're kind of asking for it.
All right, fair enough.
She can speak for herself.
You're not on our social media. Well, I'm the
point.
one who's talking. Yeah. There it is.
And I'm the one with the imaginary friend.
If you would like to follow up with me personally, I am at PRaider1492 on all social media platforms. If you want to follow up with the show, it is at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you could give us a 5-star rate and review on iTunes, that would be fantastic. We really do appreciate that. I do have a review to read out this week, as I said we were going to start doing here very soon.
Wow. We should have left a review for you to read.
Wouldn't have that been special? This looks familiar. This is from J Newman60. It says, "Great podcast. I really enjoy this podcast. Perry has a warm, genuine quality that makes him easy to listen to. The show is knowledgeable about bourbon and its culture without any pretense. Just like his Perry pours, you will leave the podcast with more than you came with." J Newman60, thank you so much for putting in that review. If you would like to hear your own review read out on the show, please, please, please do that. We will be happy to read that out on next week's episode. If you have questions or comments, you can send them to thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you if you have something that you would like for us to know or read about. If you are not yet a part of our Facebook group, you can head to facebook.com and search for This Is My Bourbon group, and there are just a couple of questions, and we will make sure that you are a part of that. It is a whole lot of fun. We just kind of shoot the breeze about bourbon and about the podcast, and it's a fun little community. And then last but not least, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. If you are not yet a supporter of the show and you are able to do so for as little as $1 a month, we would love for you to be a part of that community too. There are so many benefits that you get. You get things like bonus episodes, you get hangouts via Google, you get some live streams exclusively for those patrons as well. So if you would like to head over there and be a part of that community and get some of those rewards as well. Again, that is patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. Goodness gracious. Abby and Alaina, thank you all so much.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
For this episode. This is so much fun. Everybody go listen to Bourbon and Blondes. It's so much fun. It's such a great show. Appreciate you all listening to this episode. We'll see you next week, but until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.